For 15 years, he hated the man who ruined his childhood. Then one letter shattered everything. The bully who broke him was also the man who secretly made him a millionaire. Rain lashed against the windshield as Carter drove through the winding roads of rural Pennsylvania, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The GPS signal had flickered out 10 minutes ago, and now he relied on memory and the dim glow of passing road signs to guide him. He hadn't been back in 15 years, not since the funeral, not since he swore never to return. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. He ignored it, probably Madison again. His assistant had been panicking all week, reminding him about board meetings, investor calls, quarterly targets. But Carter had made up his mind. The company could wait, for once. The old town hadn't changed much. Same faded diner, same rusting gas station. Carter slowed as he approached the hill, the one he used to race down on his bike when he was 10. A memory struck him, a blur of wind, laughter, and a pair of hands shoving him hard from behind. He'd hit the ground, teeth bloody, arm broken. Dean Whitaker. The name still tasted like ash in his mouth. The Whitakers had owned half the town back then. Construction, trucking, even the local bank. Dean was a year older, stronger, meaner, and cruel in that slow, deliberate way that made it all the more unbearable. Carter had grown up poor, in a trailer with a leaking roof and a mother who worked 3 jobs. Dean had a pool, a golf cart, and a father who carried cash in rolls the size of soda cans. By the time Carter left for college on a patchwork of scholarships, he had sworn off the past. He reinvented himself in New York, polished suits, clean investments, a tech startup that hit at just the right time. Now he sat atop a fortune most people could fathom, but money hadn't erased the bitterness. Some people, Carter had decided, didn't deserve forgiveness. So when the letter arrived last week, unsigned but bearing an unmistakable tone of familiarity, something inside him snapped. You owe it to her. She died waiting. Come back. No return address, no signature, just that. And now here he was, pulling into the cracked driveway of the trailer he hadn't seen in over a decade. Weeds clawed at the siding. The porch sagged under the weight of time. He stepped out into the rain, heart pounding, the scent of wet earth and rust pulling him backward in time. The door creaked open easily. Inside, dust danced in the shafts of gray light. The couch where his mother used to sleep was still there, sunken in the middle. Her photo on the wall, him in his high school graduation gown, her in a thrift store dress, smiling like she'd won the lottery. He stood there silent. Then he saw the envelope on the table, thick, handwritten. To Carter. He tore it open. Inside, a bank statement, a trust fund, his name on it, set up 18 years ago, a sum that had ballooned into millions. A note attached, in familiar handwriting he hadn't seen since he was 17. Sometimes doing the right thing means never getting thanked. I did what I could. D.W. Carter's knees buckled. Dean Whitaker. The name exploded in his chest like shrapnel. The coffee shop on 7th Street was where Daniel went when he needed to remember that he was still a human being. The barista knew his name. The espresso was bitter enough to make him flinch. And nobody cared that he owned 3 companies and had his face in Forbes last quarter. He sat near the window, watching rain slide down the glass in crooked trails. The world outside looked like it was melting. It suited his mood. Across from him, Olivia picked at her muffin, eyes scanning his face for cracks. She hadn't seen him in 6 months, not since he'd refused to fund her startup, not since she'd called him a soulless capitalist in front of their father's grave. She didn't apologize. She never did. But today she wasn't angry. She was scared. I got an anonymous wire transfer, she said. 50 grand. Daniel frowned. You serious? She slid her phone across the table. Bank app open. Transaction listed. A perfect clean deposit from nowhere. And the note, she added, it came separately, emailed, said, to help someone who deserves more than she got. No name, no contact. Daniel exhaled, confused. You think it was me? Her eyebrows lifted. Was it? He shook his head. Why would I give you money after the way you torched me in front of Mom? She stared at him. Because I'm your sister, because you know I wasn't entirely wrong. He looked away. The rain outside had picked up. Thunder mumbled in the distance. He hadn't spoken to his sister since their falling out, over money, naturally. Their father's inheritance had been divided unevenly, a final cruel gesture from a man who had always preferred his firstborn. Daniel had received the company, the house, the investments. Olivia had been left a watch and a handwritten letter about how adversity builds character. She'd thrown the letter into the fireplace. Daniel hadn't stopped her. "You gonna keep it?" he asked, nodding toward her phone. "What am I supposed to do? Return it to the void?" He didn't smile. He almost admired her ability to weaponize bitterness. She'd been a theater kid once, good at pretending, but the tremble in her hand wasn't for show. She was unraveling. "I don't like it," he said. "Feels like a trap." She looked up, expression suddenly sharp. "You're not the only one who knows people, Daniel. Maybe I have a guardian angel too." He snorted, "Not in this city." They sat in silence for a moment, both nursing old wounds neither had words for. Outside, a delivery truck splashed through a puddle, startling a couple hurrying beneath a single umbrella. Then Olivia said something that chilled him. "You ever hear from Bari?" Daniel's shoulders tensed. "Why?" "No reason," she said too quickly. He narrowed his eyes. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything, just remember how he used to follow Dad around like a dog, how you always hated him." Hated wasn't strong enough. Bari Morton had been their father's golden protege, an oily, conniving accountant who'd weaseled his way into the will reading, only to get shut out at the last second. Daniel had thought he was done with Bari the day the ink dried on the estate. "I haven't seen him in years," Daniel said, tone flat, "and I hope I never do." Olivia's eyes lingered on him a moment longer, then she nodded and stood. "Let me know if you hear anything." She left a crumpled napkin on the table, a smear of lipstick the only trace of her being there at all. Daniel watched her disappear into the storm and felt something tighten in his gut, familiar and wrong. He didn't believe in ghosts, but the past had a way of knocking on doors you thought were nailed shut. And somewhere in the rattling corners of his memory, Bari Morton smiled. Bari Morton hadn't aged well. The years had taken something from his posture, maybe the sly confidence, maybe the glint of ambition, but his eyes still burned with the same quiet calculation. He stood in the shadows of the hospice hallway, watching the nurse walk past without noticing him. That was Bari's gift, disappearing in plain sight. He hadn't expected to come back either, not to this place, not to Carter Langston's name on a doorplate. But there it was, room 214. He hesitated outside the door, his fingers twitching like they still remembered numbers and signatures and the sharp sound of a pen cutting across legal paper. Then he knocked. Once. Twice. Nothing. He opened the door. Inside, the air was dry and still. An old man lay in the bed, thin under the blankets, his face sunken but unmistakable. Gerald Langston, Carter's uncle, the one who'd vanished after the will was settled. Bari stepped closer. A heart monitor beeped faintly. A photo sat on the nightstand, Carter as a boy, maybe 7 years old, grinning with front teeth missing, standing beside his mother and Gerald. "Been a long time," Bari said softly. Gerald stirred. His eyes fluttered open. For a moment they stared blankly at the ceiling. Then they found Bari. "You," he rasped, "you've got nerve." Bari smiled. "I always did." "You shouldn't be here." "Probably not." Gerald coughed dry hollow. "If Carter finds out." "He won't. I didn't come to stir up ghosts." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "Then why are you here?" Bari sat. His bones protested. He pulled out a folded paper from his jacket, slid it onto the bedside table. "I came to deliver that, the final transfer, the trust fund. It's all liquid now. Carter's name, no strings." Gerald stared at the paper, unreadable. Bari continued, "I kept it quiet like you asked. Set it up after your sister passed. You knew Carter would never take it if he knew it came from me." "He hates you." Bari nodded. "Yeah, and maybe he should, but I still owed her, what she did for me." "You repaid her," Gerald said sharply. "This was never about you." "No, it was about him." Bari's voice softened. He deserved a better shot, and I knew he'd never believe it unless the name was hidden. Silence. Then Gerald whispered, "He's back, came to the trailer, found the letter." Barry flinched. Did he know it was me? Not yet, but he will. Barry stood. Then I'll be gone before that happens. He turned to leave. Barry, Gerald croaked. Why now? Why finish it? Barry paused, hand on the door. His voice cracked just a little. Because some debts don't age out, and maybe I'm tired of pretending I don't care. He closed the door behind him. Back in the city, Carter sat in his penthouse, the letter from Dean Whittaker on the counter beside an untouched drink. He'd tried calling Gerald. No answer. He'd tried calling the bank, everything checked out. Legally clean. No errors, no traps. And still it didn't make sense. Dean Whittaker was a monster. Always had been. Carter still remembered the bruises, the humiliation, the silence when teachers asked where he'd gotten the black eye. Why would Dean do something like this? He poured the drink, let the scotch burn his throat, and stared out at the skyline. Then his phone rang. Blocked number. He let it ring once, twice, picked it up. Hello. A long pause. Then, "You're not asking the right questions, Carter." The voice was low, familiar, coated in something that made Carter's skin crawl. Who is this? But the line had already gone dead. Carter didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, phone face down, laptop open but untouched. The voice on the call haunted him, calm, measured, with a hint of something theatrical. It wasn't Dean. That much he was sure of. Dean's voice was deeper, more abrasive. He'd never been one for riddles. But someone knew too much. The letter, the trust, the history. At dawn, Carter finally moved. He called a name he hadn't spoken in over a decade. "Madison," he said as she picked up groggy. "I need you to run a background check, deep one, on a Barry Morton." She didn't ask why, she never did. "Give me a few hours." He hung up. Barry, that name came crawling out of his past like something wet and half-buried. He'd heard it in whispers growing up, his mother warning Gerald to stay away, Dean snickering about some crooked numbers guy. Carter had never met him, but now he wondered, was Barry the real source of all this? Across town, Olivia stared at the envelope on her kitchen table like it was ticking. Another note had come, this time in her mailbox, no postage, just placed there. "What your brother doesn't know will hurt him. He's not the only one who was lied to." She didn't know whether to laugh or scream, who was playing with them. The thought of Barry had shaken her. She hadn't seen him since she was 15, but she remembered the way he'd smirked at her father's funeral, the way he'd been escorted out by two lawyers who looked like they hated him even more than the family did. She picked up her phone, called Carter. "We need to talk." They met in Central Park, neutral ground. Carter leaned against a tree, arms crossed. Olivia sat on a bench, hood up, eyes red. She handed him the envelope without a word. He read it, his jaw clenched. "Someone's watching us," he said, "knows our history. You think it's Barry. I think it might be worse." She blinked. "Worse than Barry?" "I don't know, maybe someone who was always around. Quiet, close." They sat in silence. Then Carter said, "I found out who funded the trust. Officially, it's under a shell company, but it traces back to an account in Baltimore. Guess whose name was on the original documents?" "Dean." He shook his head slowly. "No, Barry Morton, but here, the twist, it was co-signed. Guess by who?" Her stomach dropped. "No." "Gerald." Olivia gripped the bench. "Uncle Gerald, he didn't have money like that." "He did, just not clean, and they covered it well, started it right after Mom died." "Why would he help Barry?" Carter didn't answer. Olivia leaned back, trying to make sense of it. "You think it was guilt? Or fear? Or leverage? Or maybe he believed in me more than I realized? And Barry? I don't know what Barry wants now, but this feels like it's only halfway revealed." That night, Barry sat in a smoky motel room just outside the city. He poured himself a glass of cheap bourbon and stared at an old photograph on the table. 3 people, Carter's mother, Gerald, and himself. A time before money poisoned everything, before guilt started dictating his moves like a silent puppeteer. He remembered the night she called him Carter's mom, desperate, afraid. She knew she didn't have much time and she wanted to make sure her son had a shot at something better. "You're the only one who can hide this right," she'd said. "He'll never take it if it comes from me." She hadn't said why, but Bari had agreed, not because he cared about the boy, but because she was the only person who had ever seen the good in him. And now Carter was close. Bari could feel it. The clock was running down. He picked up his phone, dialed. "Yeah," he said, "time for the truth." Madison called just before midnight. I traced the Baltimore account further. It was scrubbed hard, but not perfectly. There's one signature that stood out: Carter. Bari used Gerald's power of attorney for the original fund. He was sick even back then. Carter was standing by his apartment window, overlooking the rain-washed city. His chest felt tight. So Bari forged it. Not exactly. Gerald signed, but there's a clause. It was a deal. Gerald gave Bari control over the trust, in exchange for silence. Carter turned away from the window. Silence about what? She hesitated. There was another name involved. A transfer from your mother's account just days before her death. Half her savings disappeared, went to a private firm under a false name. Guess who handled it? Carter didn't speak. Bari. The line crackled. Madison exhaled. "I think your mom gave Bari money, and Bari used that to start the fund. But the question is, did she give it willingly?" Carter ended the call without saying goodbye. He couldn't sleep. The couch felt like gravel under him. The letter from Dean was still there on the kitchen island, mocking him. Sometimes doing the right thing means never getting thanked. That line played in his head like a broken record. Was it Dean who funded him? Or was it Bari, using everyone else as cover? By morning, he had made up his mind. He drove out to the hospice alone. The nurse recognized him. "You're the nephew. Gerald hasn't had visitors in weeks. Just one man yesterday. Said he was a family friend." Bari. She blinked, didn't give a name. Carter pushed open the door. Gerald lay still, breathing shallow, eyes open but distant. Time had taken most of him. But when Carter stepped closer, the old man blinked once, slow, like recognition crawled in late. "Uncle Gerald," Carter said quietly, "I need the truth." Gerald coughed, turned his head slightly. "You found it." "I found something. Bari, the trust, the money." Gerald's voice was barely air. "Your mother, she made me promise not to tell." "She gave him money. Did she trust him?" A slow, painful nod. "She said he owed her, long ago, saved his life once. She believed people could change." Carter sank into the chair beside the bed. "I don't." Gerald smiled weakly. "That's why she didn't tell you." He reached with trembling fingers toward the drawer by his bed. Carter opened it. Inside was another envelope, thicker, yellowed, addressed to my son when he's ready. Carter opened it. Inside, a handwritten letter, a bank statement, and an old photo. The photo showed his mother, Bari, and Dean Whittaker, smiling. In the letter, his mother's voice came back to him, full of warmth and contradictions. "I know you hate Dean, I know what he did. But sometimes people break because they were never taught to be whole. He was your brother, Carter, half-brother, Gerald's mistake, but not yours. Dean didn't know how to love you, but he tried his way. That fund, it was his idea. He asked Bari to set it up. Told me to never tell you it was him, said you. Never forgive him, and he didn't want thanks, just to know you'd be okay. He's gone now, but I hope one day you'll understand." Carter froze. "Brother." The word hit like an open hand. Dean, the bully, the tormentor, had been trying in some twisted, silent way to make things right. The weight of the revelation crushed his chest. Bari sat in a park on the edge of town, feeding crumbs to pigeons, looking like just another old man lost in thought. His phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. "He knows." Bari smiled, not smug, not triumphant, just tired. He stood, brushed crumbs from his coat, and started walking, no destination, just away. Carter didn't cry. He read the letter 3 times in silence, his fingers trembling, mouth dry. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket. As he stood, Gerald reached for his hand, grip weak but insistent. "He loved you," the old man said, "Dean, in the only way he knew how." Carter nodded, but didn't speak. Love wasn't a word he associated with Dean Whittaker, not when most of their childhood interactions ended in bruises or humiliation. But maybe, just maybe, the cruelty had masked something more broken underneath. He left the hospice as the sun finally pierced through the clouds. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened with everything it had washed away. Later that day, Carter met Olivia in a small corner cafe downtown. No bodyguards, no phone, just him, her, and a secret too big to carry alone. He slid the photo across the table. She stared. "That's Mom, Barry, and Dean." He nodded. "Gerald's son from an affair. Mom raised him like a relative, said he never knew the truth, but she did, said he didn't know how to love me." Olivia leaned back, stunned. "That's why she kept taking him back, even after what he did to you." "She didn't excuse it," Carter said, "but she wanted him to have a shot." "And the trust fund?" "Dean's idea. He had Barry set it up anonymously after she died. He wanted me to have a future, just didn't want to be in it." They sat in the stillness that follows earthquakes. Olivia shook her head slowly. "So the one man you hated most saved your life? Financially, at least?" "No," she said, "not just that. Without that money, without that start, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be Carter Langston." He stared at his coffee. It had gone cold. "I don't know how to feel." "You're allowed not to." Then she leaned forward. "What are you going to do about Barry?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I don't think I need to." Barry was already gone. By the time Carter hired someone to trace him, he had disappeared. No forwarding address. No digital footprint. The motel room was cleared, the safe empty. The only thing left behind was a note written on hotel stationery. "A good man doesn't need credit. A guilty one doesn't want it." No signature, but unmistakably Barry. Carter stared at it long and hard. Then he burned it. Weeks passed, then months. Carter returned to his company, but something in him had changed. He started arriving early, leaving late, not to impress anyone, but because the work gave him order, a kind of anchor. He started donating too, quietly, to shelters, education programs, addiction clinics, all anonymously. One evening, he stood in front of a classroom on the south side of the city, giving a talk to kids about entrepreneurship. A boy raised his hand and asked, "How did you get rich?" Carter smiled. "Luck, pain, and someone I didn't like believing in me when I didn't deserve it." In her apartment, Olivia unpacked a new envelope. No threats this time, just a simple printout, a $200,000 donation made in her name to fund female-led startups. Anonymous. She smiled, not because she didn't know who it was from, but because she finally understood why. Spring arrived like a long exhale. Carter stood on the porch of the old trailer, which now looked nothing like the place he'd once fled. He'd had it repaired, repainted, the roof fixed, the porch reinforced, not to live in but to preserve, as a reminder. He held the photo again, his mother, Dean, Barry, 3 people who'd shaped him in ways he was only just beginning to understand. One gone, one vanished, one forgiven in silence. A local woman walked by with her dog and waved. "You moving in?" she called out. Carter shook his head, smiled. "Just visiting." He drove back into town, past the gas station, the diner, the same cracked sidewalk where Dean had once tripped him in front of the whole class. The same place where, later that same day, Dean had picked him up, dusted him off, and shoved 5 crumpled dollars into his pocket without a word. Carter hadn't remembered that part until now. In a box buried deep in storage, Carter found one final surprise. A ledger. Barry's handwriting. Detailed, meticulous records of every dollar that went into the trust. Names, dates, even brief explanations. Every decision made to protect Carter. Every lie told to keep the truth from interfering. On the last page, one final entry. "If he ever finds this, tell him it wasn't about redemption. It was about debt, and the woman who made me want to be better. That was all. No flourish, no confession of love or regret. Just a record, a man doing his version of right quietly without applause. Carter visited his mother's grave on a Thursday. He brought flowers, the good kind, expensive, fragrant, wildly out of place among the faded plastic bouquets from other graves nearby. He sat on the grass, legs crossed, letter in hand. "Dean was your son," he said quietly. "I understand now, I didn't then. I don't forgive him for everything, but I see what he was trying to do." He looked up at the sky. It was a brilliant blue, the kind of day she would have called a miracle. "And Barry, I hated him for years, but he kept your promise. He made sure I had a shot, that I wouldn't end up bitter and broken." His throat tightened. "I don't know what that makes me now, but I'm going to try to be someone who doesn't need to hide behind ghosts anymore." He stood, brushed grass from his jeans. "I love you," he whispered, "and I'm grateful, even for the parts that still hurt." 6 months later, Carter received a letter, no return address, no signature. Inside, a photo of a beach somewhere remote, a tiny boat, a man in a wide-brimmed hat fishing alone. On the back, 3 words scratched in bold ink. "Still watching, kid." Carter laughed genuinely. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like running from the past. He turned off his phone, stepped out onto the terrace, and let the sun touch his face. The road behind him was lined with shadows. But ahead, nothing but light.